How could someone whose presence was so large fit into that small box? Pop was always known for his sense of humor, so here are some Pop jokes to lighten the mood a little bit. A horse walked into the bar and the bartender said, "Why the long face? What do you call a no-legged dog?" "Cigarette. Could you take him out for a drag?" "Why did the bicycle fall over?" "It was too tired." "What has more lives than a cat?" "A frog. It croaks every day." "And what has wheels and flies?" "A garbage truck." For those of you who don't know, I'm Nicole, Pop's first grandchild. I am his Nikki. I always loved when I would call the house and Pop would pick up the phone, Nana would go, "Who is it?" and he would say, "My Nikki." Anyways, I was Pop's granddaughter when he was only 46 years old. My husband's 45. I cannot even fathom him becoming a grandfather next year. So needless to say, Pop was still in parent mode when I came along. When I was little, my parents were so in love that they would want to spend time with each other, and I would get dropped off at 66 Hunt Avenue and spend time with whoever was around to babysit. Most times it was my nanny, other times it was my 3 uncles who were still living at home. I would hang out around the house, helping my grandmother with anything she needed, rolling dimes, sorting Avon orders, and just cleaning. Pop would come home for lunch and then leave and go back to work. I thought it was the coolest thing. Both my dad and my grandfather were never around during the day for lunch. It was so much fun. Becoming a grandfather at 46 meant he was still a little bit tough. So my experience with him as a grandfather was completely different from that of my cousins. He was stern but loving, and his approval wasn't the easiest to get, but when you got it, it meant that much more. As Pop grew older, having lost Nani and gained Nana, he definitely softened. I would tease him and tell him his estrogen was sneaking out. When I got engaged, he trotted across the showroom at Jim Smith, hugged me and congratulated me for finding such a hardworking man. When I had my kids, he was a doting great-grandfather. I was kind of jealous with how soft he had become and how much he treasured my kids. It was then I realized how much he remembered from my younger years. He would tell me stories about his own kids and me and my siblings, things I never thought he cared about, but apparently he did very much. He told me how when my mother was a little girl, he would hand her 2 toys. Then he would go and hand her a 3rd. She would look at him, like a little 2-year-old would, and hand him one of the toys in one of her hands, and then he'd hand her the 3rd toy, and she'd get all frustrated because she wanted all 3 toys at once but couldn't figure it out. He told me about how Uncle Andy was so smart and tough from such a young age. Pop was impressed with his bravery and compassion. He mentioned when Uncle Andy was hit by the car, how desperate he felt and wished he could have switched places with him. He told me about Uncle Ed, always being the model son and working hard to make him proud. He said that Uncle Ed had inherited his temper, but also his sensitivity. Finally, he would tell me stories about Uncle John and how cute he was. He mentioned the time Uncle John fell backwards off the front porch and cracked his head. He was terrified and fought with the doctor to take care of him immediately. Telling stories is how we share experiences or teach others. Pop was always good for a story that taught a lesson or shared a memory. He had so many, but I don't want to keep you here all day. When my children were little, I used to write bedtime stories based on family members. Each family member had a role in the fairy tale, and whenever I wrote about Pop, he was a knight or a soldier. Pop always reminded me of John Wayne, or better yet, most of the men John Wayne played. He did what was right no matter what. He was not a hypocrite, and he stood by his beliefs. He never spoke out of turn, and he listened more than he talked. John Wayne once said, "I define manhood simply. Men should be tough, fair, and courageous. Never petty, never looking for a fight, but never backing down from one either." My Pop was all those things and more. He was kind and empathetic, dutiful and very loving. When sitting with Pop and talking about his life, he always used to preach empathy. Never judge a man until you walk a mile in his moccasins. And everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. He also never said a bad word about anyone. Quoting Thumper, he'd say, "If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all." I can remember standing downstairs at his house and rehearsing that line with my hands behind my back and Pop smiling and nodding. He was always fair-minded and honest. I remember one time crying when I was telling him about some of my issues, and he told me, Nick, everyone has problems. If problems were rocks and you went into a party and you could place all your problems on a table and you could switch problems with other people at the party, you would leave with your own problems. Your problems are your own, and you know how to deal with them. He was right. We all have issues, but we know how to deal with our issues. Over the last 10 years, Pop's health was not the best, but he always had a smile on his face. He was always cheerful when I visited with him, and he never complained. He would tell me that he felt fortunate that he was still here. I made the mistake once of telling him that if I lost the ability to walk, I would just want to die. He told me that's the vanity of youth. You don't realize how precious every second you are here until you're almost not. Pop always spoke about love. In the last few years, I was his tech support, and I'd come over and fix his devices and return Amazon orders of like 36 chairs. While there, he and I would chat, and one of the best conversations I had with him was when I asked him about what he valued most. He said the people he loved. He told me that he counted himself extra blessed because he got to marry his first love, and when she passed on, he found his amazing second love. On Wednesday, when I was in the hospital with him, he said between labored breaths that he loved both his wives so much, and he could not have been the man he was without them. He told me that Nana was the reason he was still here, calling 911 when he had his heart attack and taking good care of him in his old age. He knew it wasn't easy for Nana, and she ignored his nastiness and his aggravation, and she loved him anyway. Thank you, Nana, for taking such good care of Papa. One of the most amazing examples Pop set for us was the way he always was there for all the family. After my nanny died, he still loved her family, staying in touch with all of them, and in some cases, taking care of them. I asked him once why he continued to stay in touch with them after she passed away. You know, you're kind of free at that point. And he told me they're my family, and I love them. Your Uncle Bobby is my little brother too, and not just your nanny's. Throughout his life, my Pop played many roles: a son, a Marine, a cop, a volunteer firefighter, a car salesman, a friend, a father, a husband, an uncle, a cousin, a papa, and so many more. He was a dutiful son, a strong father, and a loving grandfather. He was at almost everything we did. In my 40 years on this planet, I received a birthday gift from him every year. This year, he was kind enough to take my mom and I out for lunch, and it was great. He understood that time spent was more valuable than any other gift he could give. When I think of my Pop-Pop, so many wonderful memories come to mind. From the time I was young and sleeping at his house to a few days ago, he was a strong man. I spend a lot of time reflecting on my blessings, and Pop has always been one. He has been a pillar of this family and one of my greatest cheerleaders. I will miss him very much. And I know, and I know he's with those we've already lost, and we will meet again. Love you, Pop.